What's the key metric I'm looking for Tyler Van Dyke this year to determine how successful he is for the Wisconsin Badgers?
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Badger fans, what is going on? Welcome to Locked On Badgers. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ryan Harings, your team every single day. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate y'all. Thank you for helping us build this community. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Listen, we're here in the summer, but FanDuel is here with you. They want to make sure you have something to do all summer long. FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, let's talk about some key numbers I wanted to track. So I have a bunch of numbers I've been thinking about. These are milestones and metrics the Badgers have to hit this year to be successful, whether it's team metrics or player metrics. I want to start with TVD, right? Because the quarterback is the straw that stirs the camel's back. No, the straw that stirs the soup. No, the quarterbacks matter. I don't know. I lost my train of thought on that analogy. Quarterbacks matter. Let's talk about the key metric I'm looking for Tyler Van Dyke. It's 2.5 to 1. That's the number I'm looking for. 2.5 to 1. What are we talking about? Touchdown to interception ratio. I think he's got to hit 2.5 to 1. That's the floor. He has to get there. That means if he's at 2.5 to 1 touchdown interception ratio, 25 touchdowns, that means 10 picks. That works. It's not great. If he could get to 3 to 1, 30 touchdowns, 10 picks, that type of thing, 27 to 9, that really works. But he has to get to 2.5 to 1. His best year in 2021, it was 4 to 1. He was incredible. His last 2 years have been more like 2 to 1. And he has to get above that threshold. He doesn't have to get to the best. He doesn't have to be that 2021 version of Tyler Van Dyke. It'd be amazing if we got that. If we got that version of Tyler Van Dyke, not only is he getting drafted, but the Badgers, the ceiling goes up and the floor goes up. But if he can just give you steady play again, 25 touchdowns-ish, 10 picks-ish, that's a 2.5 to 1 touchdown interception ratio. That absolutely plays. You look back at Badger quarterbacks, one of the really good underrated Badger quarterbacks that doesn't get talked about a bunch, Scott Tolzien, right? 2010. He was right at that 2.5 to 1 touchdown interception ratio. That works in this offense. That'll play. It also means that he's taking better care of the ball. It means that his reads are clear. It means that he's seeing the field pretty well. It means that he's not forcing a ton of throws, right? If he can get to that type of ratio, or better, I think the Badgers are in pretty good shape there. Can he? I don't know, right? The last 2 years, he hasn't done it. In 2022 and 2023, he hasn't been at that spot. Last year, he wasn't even at a 2 to 1. Like, completion percentage is great. He's going to be fine there. He's going to be in the 60s, low 60s. That's going to be fine. He's going to give you some rushing touchdowns. He's going to give you some splash plays. He's going to give you some yardage. To me, it all comes down to, with him, decision-making. Does he force the ball? And where you're going to see the output of that primarily is touchdowns and interceptions, turnovers or bang plays, right? Can he get to that 2.5 to 1? I think that's the metric I'm looking for. If he can get there, I feel really good about this team. I feel really good about the offense. I feel good about my 8 to 9 win projection. If he struggles to get there, this team is probably more in the 7 to 8, 6 to 8 win range, because it means we're turning the ball over more. We're probably not running the ball really well because we're putting him in bad spots. He has to be able to take care of the football and make good reads. That's what we've heard about Tyler Van Dyke. That's been the criticism. Can he take care of the ball? He has to be able to this year. If he's hitting that metric, I think it means he is. All right, my next big number. This whole show is just big numbers that I think matter. Numbers we have to hit as a team to be able to really get to that 8-9 win threshold. My next big one is you have to get to 34 or 35 sacks. Again, that's kind of the floor. The Badgers have had years with those really good defenses. They've had way more than that. Last year, they were at 29. 29 is not good enough. You have to get to 33, 34, 35, somewhere in that range. If you're getting 33, 34, 35 sacks in a season, you're in the top 25th percentile of the Big Ten year to year on average, right? So getting to that number, you're among the top. Well, now the Big Ten's expanded, but that puts you in the range of the better teams in the Big Ten at being disruptive. Because what are sacks, right? Sacks are disruption. They are putting the offense in a bad spot. They're flipping the field. They're potentially strip sacks, right? They're they're signs. Sacks are the outcome of being disruptive. Sacks are the outcome of pressure. Sacks are the outcome of being really good in the front seven. Sacks are the outcome of dictating down in distance, putting the offense in spots where they have a difficult time protecting their quarterback. You have to be better at that this year for the Badgers. If this is going to be a successful season, again, you don't need to lead the conference in sacks. I talked about it. You look at some of those banger Badger defenses in 2020 and 2021, they had 39 sacks. In 2019, they had 51 sacks. 2017, 42 sacks. I'm not saying you get to that number because you're probably not going to. You're probably not going to get 42, 51, 39. But you can't have in the 20s again. They had 29 last year, right? And that's one of those numbers you look at and you're like, yeah, that feels about right. Because you go back and you think, what were the big disruptive plays we had? Who were the big disruptive players? We didn't have enough of them. Well, the stats back it up. We didn't have enough sacks. Now you bring in these linebackers. You bring in Jaheim Thomas. You bring in Tackett Curtis. You bring in John Pius. You bring in Leon Lowry. You get Christian Allegro. Jake Chaney looks great. You got to get those sack numbers up. And I know sacks aren't everything. I 100% get that. Disruption matters. Hitting the quarterback matters. Forcing him off his spot matters. But ultimately, the best defenses have elite sack numbers for a reason, right? We got to get to that 34, 35 range. I think that's vitally important for this defense. And it does so much, right, in terms of field position. It gets your offense back on the field. It rattles quarterbacks. We have to be more disruptive. I think we're going to. And if we get to that number, who are those sack guys, right? I've been thinking about this too. If you get to 34, 35 sacks, where do those sacks come from? This is going to, you had 29 last year. Gerald Peterson had 4.5. The defensive line as a whole had 3.5 last year, I believe. So how are you getting to 34, 35 this year? I think John Pius, who I talked about in the last show, I love him. I love his upside. I think he can get you 7, 8 potentially. I think Leon Lowry can get you 6, 7, maybe 6, 7 in that range. The defense line should be able to get you 4-ish. They got you 3.5 last year. I think the middle linebacker duo of Christian Allegro, Jake Chaney at 3 last year. I think you can get 10 out of that group probably. So right there, if you get 10 out of the middle, 8-ish from Pius, 6-ish from Lowry, 4 from the defensive line, that's about 28 right there. So you're getting close already, right? And then I think you're going to get a couple out of a Jaheim Thomas. You're going to get a couple out of maybe the defensive line takes a step. Now you're pushing into that 31, 32, 33 range. I think they can get there. I think they need to get there. It's one of the keys to this year. Be more disruptive, hit the quarterback, flip the field. I think they brought in the horses to do it. So I expect that to increase, but they need to get into that mid-30s range, which puts them in the upper 25th percentile of the Big Ten. Typically, I think it would again this year. And if they can get more than that, just like TVD, if TVD can do better than 2.5 to 1, that's awesome. If they can get not just 34, 35 sacks from this front seven, if they can bump that up to low 40s, high 30s, yeah, that means it's really working in year 2 here. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back with more numbers, more metrics on the defensive side that I think are really important. I want to talk to you about Hunter Wohler and why I hope his numbers go down a little bit and why I think it's important. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show over at FanDuel. FanDuel is the number one source for all of your sports betting needs. Whatever you're doing, there's a reason they are. We use them on the Locked On Network because they're fast, simple, and easy. Go to FanDuel.com. And you're going to find the widest selection of futures, parlays, teaser, spreads. The user interface is incredibly easy. Like, it's simple. You jump right in. You don't need to be clickety-clackety all over the monitor trying to figure it out. It's simple. It's easy. The payouts are incredibly easy. I've been involved in other sites where I've somehow won because I'm not always great with the lines. I bet with my heart. We know this. But I've been involved in other sites, and I couldn't figure out how to get the payouts, or you have to call somebody, and then you get put on hold. FanDuel's not like that. When you win, it's fast. It's simple to get your money back out. FanDuel's an incredible spot. Right now, visit FanDuel.com. Go join all the other people on the Locked On Network that use FanDuel as the official sports book for all of our sports betting needs. Okay, let's keep going here. I had fun with this one because a lot of lines, a lot of numbers that I was interested in breaking down, and where do the Badgers need to improve? I want to talk defense here. I want to talk Hunter Wohler. I think this is an important one. Hunter Wohler was an absolute monster last year, right? A heat-seeking ballistic missile. He's bigger this year. He's faster this year. He's stronger this year. It's easy to say, man, he had 120 tackles last year. Could he get 125 this year? I talked to Brady Collins. Brady Collins said he's put on about 15 pounds of muscle. He's faster. Here's the thing. You don't want him to have that many tackles, in my opinion. I think the number I'm looking for Hunter Wohler, I want Hunter Wohler to get to about 110 tackles or less. He had 120 last year. He had 120 last year because he was the human eraser, right? He was always going sideline to sideline, cleaning up perimeter runs, cleaning up runs up the middle. If our linebackers are better this year, which I think they're going to be, those opportunities for him to clean some of that up go away. And that's good. That's a good thing. You're going to see his numbers dip, but what does that ultimately mean? It ultimately means our front seven is doing their friggin' jobs, right? I'm not saying they weren't last year. I'm not trying to be overly harsh, but listen, we all saw the film. We know what it was. You know, the rush defense had some issues, and we don't need to beat around the bush on that. I've said it in a previous show. If it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, don't call it a dinosaur, right? It's a duck. The rush defense wasn't good enough, which was why your safety in the back seven had 120 tackles. You don't want that. As good as he is, you don't want that. You don't want that for two reasons. The first one I talked about, it means your front seven's not doing their job. Okay, but the second one is you don't want your star safety, the heartbeat of your defense, the heart and soul of maybe that entire locker room. You don't want him having to take on that much physicality over the course of a season. Like, he's going to get banged up. He's going to get worn down a little bit. And he's bigger. He's put on more weight. And listen, he's not probably ever going to be the one that tells you, yeah, it's too much. I'll get worn down. But it'll happen. You want him flying around making plays, not constantly putting his foot in the dirt, going north and south and cleaning up running lanes. Okay. So I want to see him. I think if this defense is good, if it takes a step up, he's at like 100 tackles, and but he'll be more disruptive, right? Less tackles, but he'll be able to roam more. He'll be more disruptive. He'll be fresher. He'll make more big plays. He'll make more disruptive plays, maybe 2 or 3 more sacks, a couple more forced fumbles, a couple more interceptions, because he's not constantly barreling down the field and tackling 220-pound running backs. So I think that's a really important one. Let's see if Hunter Wohler's tackles go down, and if they do, I think it's actually a really good sign for the defense. Here's my next defensive number that needs to get better. 3.5. That's the number. They got to get the rush defense yards per carry down to about 3.5. And again, that's kind of the minimum. If you can do better than that, great. If you can get it to 3.35, 3.25, something like that, then you're really cooking here. Then we know things are really working. Last year, they were at 3.83 yards per attempt for opposing offenses. 3.83 doesn't cut it, right? Because 3.83 means your defense line's probably getting pushed around a little bit. 3.83 means, you're putting the opposing offense in 2nd and 6s, 2nd and 5s. Now you open up the playbook for them. You need to cut that down. The great Badger defenses, which I don't expect this team to be like the 2017 Badgers defense, or some of those teams that were absolutely incredible, where they were holding teams to 1.9 yards per carry, 2.7. That's unrealistic. That's not the expectation. 3.5 gets you right about top 50 percentile in the Big Ten most years. I went back and looked. 3.5 gets you middle of the pack. Middle of the pack's not great, but not everything's going to be great this early in the Luke Fickell era, right? Excuse me. You need baby steps. You need progression. If anyone's seen the movie What About Bob? Like, baby steps to top half of the conference, then baby steps to the conference title game, then baby steps to the playoff. If you haven't seen that movie, I apologize, but progression is going to take a little bit of time. Last year was not good enough. The rush defense was gashed way more than Badger fans are used to, and that exposed the linebackers that created all sorts of issues for the defense. It has to get better. If they can get that rush defense to about 3.5 yards per carry per opponent for opponents, then you're, again, setting your linebackers up for a little more success, right? You're creating situations where you can rush the passer. It means your defensive line is holding ground and kind of making that line of scrimmage a little contested, a little mucky. You want it a little mucky at that line of scrimmage if you're a defensive lineman. So that's my next key there, 3.5. Here's my next one. 3rd down conversion. And this ties into the one we just talked about. 3rd down conversion defense last year was bad. They allowed opponents to convert 39% of the 3rd downs. That's heartbreaking, right? Those are drive continuers. Those are, you see your defense linemen with their hands on their knees after a couple of those. You have to get the opposing offense off the field. They were not good at it last year. They have to get that number down this year. Get it down to about the 34% range, 34%. again, gets you more towards the middle to the upper tier of the Big Ten. And what that means is you're killing drives, right? You're forcing field position. Because if even drives that don't end in success, if you allow them, and obviously this is Captain Obvious here, but if you allow them to get those couple first downs, which we did a lot last year, now they're punting from their 40 and they're pinning you at your 15. You got to get off the field. Last year, Wisconsin was towards the bottom of the Big Ten at that. And a lot of that was tied to the rush defense we just talked about. These two things go hand in hand, right? You get defenses, or you get the defense a little more stout against the rush, hold them to about 3.5. Now suddenly you're putting them in tougher third down situations where that pass rush that we talked about kicks in, and that makes all the difference in the world. Again, we're not asking for elite numbers here. It's not going to be elite numbers this year. You go looking at the really great Badger defenses in the 2020s, right? In the 2010s, they were holding opponents to 27% third down conversion rates. By the way, I found this was interesting. I was doing some research for this show. The Badgers were absolutely elite in this category for a long time in the Big Ten. Listen to this. The Badgers led the conference, the Big Ten Conference, in third down conversion defense in 2021, 2020, 2019, 2014, and they were second in 2017, 2016, and 2015. That means 7 years, going back to 2015, essentially 2014, the Badgers were either first or second in third down conversion defense in the Big Ten. Absolutely wild stat. They completely shut people down on third down. And why did they? It's because they stopped the run on first down, and then they allowed their pass rush to eat on second and third down. They got to get back to that. And it's not going to be at that level this year. I don't think it is. If it is, I'll be great. Let's shoot some fireworks off if that's happening. But they got to get that third down conversion defense back into the low 30 percentile, our 30% range. They were at almost 40% last year. You can't allow opponents to pick up 4 out of every 10 third down because drives get too long, your defense gets worn out, your offense doesn't get on the field. And those are the drives that are killers, right? When you get to 3rd and 3, 3rd and 5, and you'll let them convert again and again and again. I think the linebackers they brought in this year are going to be a huge help in that way, right? A lot of third downs from last season were converted. Quarterbacks getting out of the pocket, not getting pressure. I think the linebackers should help in that, and hopefully we see that number come back down. All right, we're going to take a quick break here, come back, talk about a special teams number that has to improve this year. And no, it's not kicking the ball out of bounds. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show. What is going on, Badger fans? Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. Let's keep talking about numbers. I want to talk about Vakos, the kicker, Nathaniel Vakos. Vakos, actually, sorry. 1 for 4 on kicks over 50 yards last year. I think that has to get to like 50%. Like, here's the thing. We're going to be in a lot of tough games this year. We've talked about it. Penn State, Oregon, USC, Alabama, also Iowa, also Nebraska. And I'm not going to sit here and say that Northwestern or Rutgers aren't going to be sneaky tough either. There's going to be moments where you have to, and I'm not saying it has to be a 52-yarder or 51-yarder, but there's going to be moments where you have to hit a tough 49-yard field goal. You have to hit a 52-yard field goal. It's been a while, man. And it's not just Vakos. It's been a while since the Badgers, you felt confident in that situation. You felt confident that, and it's college, it's hard. It's hard to find elite kickers from that range. It's not the NFL. But I'm asking for somebody who can do it at a 50% clip. You know, Vakos was 1 for 4 last year from beyond 50 and beyond. We have to get a little bit better there. We have to at least be able to line up in that situation and threaten to put points up, because there's going to be a lot of games next year that are going to be 27-24, 31-28, right? 23-20, and we're at the 38-yard line and we got to make a decision. Can we hit a 51-yarder with some pressure? I think if that number goes from 25% successful to about 50% this year, then you're in a few more games, you're being a little more successful. I think the special teams needs to take a step up in general. And one of the things I'm looking at is, are we able, when we need to run Vakos out there, a scholarship kicker, a guy that was targeted in the portal, can we go out there and hit big-time distance kicks with pressure? And if we can't, it's going to hurt us, because there are teams out there that do that. There are teams out there that can. And that's going to put us at a disadvantage where we're going to have to call plays differently. We're going to have to sequence plays differently. We're going to have to maybe punt instead of kick that field goal and get those 3 points. That's kind of a big part of this season for me, is how good the special teams can be. Can they take a step up? Okay, let's get some offensive numbers here that I'm interested in. We talked about Van Dyke. I want to start with the big one in the room here. They got 23 points per game last year, 23.5. I want to be fair, 23.5 points per game last year. It's got to be better. Now, you can make the argument that if they get 23.5 again this year against a harder schedule, technically the offense probably got better, right? A harder schedule, averaging the same amount of points, but you can't have back-to-back years after bringing in Phil Longo, offensive guru, and get 23.5 points per game. So I think the floor, the minimum you have to get around 26 and a half. That's the floor. Like you have to add a field goal-ish to your point total per game at a minimum. Like that's the floor. It has to get there. You have to score more points in the game of football to win. I sound like John Madden. The team who scores more will win. But you have to get past that 25 range, right? If you can get to 27, 28, 29, very successful season, considering the schedule, considering it's still early in the Longo tenures, considering you're kind of breaking in a new quarterback, but it has to get around 26. And if it doesn't, listen, it's going to be hard to win a bunch of games this year if you're scoring 23, 24 points per game, right? You have to have the ability because Oregon's going to score. Newsflash, USC is going to score. I just did an episode saying USC is not ready for the Big Ten, but their offense is. Like Lincoln Riley will score points. You got to put points up. So can they get to 26, 27? If not, I think it's an ominous sign for the Badgers this year. Next one here is 180. And the number is 180 carries for Ches Malusi. He has never hit that number in his career. Ches has never gotten past 175 carries, I believe is the number. I think you have to see him get to like 180, 190 this year. I think that's really important for this team because I continue to think Ches is an underrated piece of this offense, an underrated piece of what Longo wants to do. I think he's the most versatile, the most experienced. I think he can do everything you want out of the backfield. He can pass block. We've seen it. He can run between the tackles. He has speed. He can catch. The freshman could be great. It's still kind of up in the air. And Tyree Walker is really ideally just the number 2. Ches has to stay healthy. And I think if he gets to 180, 190 carries, it's a really good sign for this offense. I think they need him. I'm rooting for him. I think he's a really good back. I think he's a little underrated because of the injury history. He's a guy who's not great at anything, but who can do anything you really want to, right? He can run with toughness between the tackles. He can break out of and gap a pretty big play. He's not an elite long speed guy, but he can gap a play and pick up 20, 30, 40 yards. He can catch the ball in the backfield. He understands blocking. He's going to make the right read in pass protection. This is an important, really important guy. I hope to goodness gracious he stays healthy. The number I'm looking for is 180 carries for Ches. Here's my next one. They got to get better on fourth down. The 4th and 2s, the 4th and 1s, the 4th and 3s. You look in the conference last year, Wisconsin was 20. They converted 25% of their fourth down attempts on 20 tries. I mean, that's 15 times they're giving the ball back. Now, in fairness, some of those are end of game, you're trailing 4th and whatever, you're trying to throw it up. I get it. A lot of those aren't that. A lot of those are the Ohio State game before halftime. A lot of those are moments in games where you have to be able to convert 4th and short. You have to. They converted 25% of their fourth down conversion attempts last year. That's 13th in the Big Ten. Only Northwestern was worse. That's a terrible, you have to get better. And it went back to that age-old debate where people were getting upset. Just go under center, snap it, and shotgun. We don't do that here, or we are going to try it, but Tanner Mordecai was hurt and our center was banged. I don't care. You have to convert more than 25% of your fourth down attempts, period. You got to do it. Minnesota, by the way, how does that 25% stack up to the rest of the conference? Minnesota converted 82% of their fourth down conversions last year. Michigan was 77%. Penn State was 76%. 5 of 20 doesn't cut it. 5 of 20 doesn't cut it, especially when a lot of those are 4th and 3, 4th and short. You got to be able to cash those in. They did not have enough of those. They had a huge one against Illinois, obviously. Like there were moments where it worked, but they have to get better than that. It doesn't have to lead the conference, but you can't be going for it on fourth down 20 times and give the ball away 15. That's not successful. I'm hoping, some added weapons in the backfield. Maybe a quarterback with a little more size. Tyler Van Dyke, obviously a little bigger, stronger than Tanner Mordecai, might give you a little more ability in that quarterback run game that can create some options on 4th and short. They have to get better there. All right, next one here for me on offense, Bryson Green. I want to see 35 to 40 catches. And again, if he gets more, amazing. Love it. Let's cook. Bryson Green is in his career, he's a 15-yard plus guy. 16 plus at Oklahoma State his last year, 15 plus even last year when he got up to a slow start. He's a guy who can make big plays. He's a guy who can make big plays on the perimeter. He's a guy who can break tackles. He has to get the ball. I think he's one of the keys to the offense because I know what we're going to get with Pauling. I think I know what we're going to get with Kekahuna. We need something else. We need a perimeter guy. I think that guy is Bryson Green. I'm excited to see what he can do this year. And if he can get 40-plus catches with what I think I know we're going to get from Tretch and Pauling, then suddenly you have 3 weapons at receiver that are producing. I like our backfield. In that situation, I feel like everything's clicking, right? And I think if he can get that type of reception, that type of production on the perimeter, it's going to open up even more Pauling and Tretch. So I'm looking for 40-plus catches from Bryson Green. And that's it. Those are some of the numbers, the key numbers I'm really looking for this year. Let me know in the comments. Let me know in the chat if there's anything you're specifically looking for a certain player or for the team. I'd be super interested in hearing it as always. And thank you. Thank you again if you're here, if you're an everydayer. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for making this part of your daily journey on Wisconsin. Let's talk tomorrow.